So I will speak about a labor voice and trade union approach. And to understand the German situation, you have to understand a little bit the institutional and the political context, why the unions are doing the experiment I'm going to talk about. The starting point is declining membership, but unions still have very high institutional power in Germany. So they have declining organizational power. The trade union density went down to 17% in 2016. Many people don't believe that. If they look at Germany, they think the trade union density is much higher. And the coverage by collective agreements is now below 60%. And the outcome is we still have very high organizational power of unions in core sectors, manufacturing, where we have trade union density in medium and big companies in the engineering of 60 to 80%, and also a high in the public service. But in other industries, there's shrinking union budgets, loss of power to bring employers on the bargaining table, and a dualization of the labor market. But the specific German situation is that German unions have a high institutional power, and which is not directly dependent on the organizational power through co-determination at plant and company level. So we have co-determination in supervisory boards with employee representatives in more than 600 companies. I myself in two supervisory boards of big steel companies, of ThyssenKrupp, for example. And then we have the works councils with strong rights of co-determinations, and also what is very important, resources to carry out their duties. This means release from work, additional staff, they can hire consultants, they attend training in trade union centers at employers' cost, etc. And we have in Germany 174,000 works councillors. And the voters they were elected on a voters' turnout of 80%. This is much more than at national elections. And most of them are trade union members. Around 8,400 are released from all works. These are more than the trade union officials. So this is really a source of power. And the institutional power of German unions is a temporary production of multi-employer bargaining. So contrary to the UK case, employers cannot just say, well, we stop multi-employer bargaining because the unions are still present in their companies. But with declining organizational power, it's only a time of question until historical compromises on institutional power are challenged, and we have all the time attacks, mainly through the EU, on the co-determination. And therefore, it's an absolutely strategic question for the survival of the German unions as a strong force determining working conditions in core sectors. It's a question of survival to activate this institutional power and also of course, to organize more members and to increase participation of union members and employees. And there is a feeling in the unions that the traditional model of representative works councils with passive members is not regarded as future-proof. You need to get involved members in and strengthen the participation of members and employees. So my second point is the role of experimentation in trade union policy. I mean, this is a big subject of this conference, Christian and Gregor wrote that unions can have power resources, but often are not particularly skilled at using them. I agree, this is often the case, but not totally true for Germany. There's a very high professional support of members in supervisory board and works councils. There are successful national campaigns on the implementation of big collective agreements at company level, which is organized and there takes place mutual learning. This took place when we had the big collective agreements on working time in the 80s or a new classification system in the 2000s. But what is true, in industrial sociology, there have been developed different typologies of works councillors, and there are active, very proactive works councillors and very passive ones, compromising with employers. They don't want unions to get involved in their deals they do with management. I think you find that everywhere in the world. And of course there is a need to replenish the stock of narrative resources, because you cannot rely organizational power on the successes of the past. You need to have successes in the present. So there are new approaches now. I mentioned the IG Metall. The IG Metall has more than 2 million members. They have a lot of money because it's a rich union compared to many other unions. But still they said, we are still rich, we don't have economic problems, but we have to act proactively. And the former president said, well, we have too many people in our headquarters, 700 full-time officials in the headquarters, very specialized in many areas, good people. And he said, we need to reduce the staff by 200 people in the headquarters to free resources for new approaches, because there is a crisis everywhere, we don't see it in the headquarters. And they did this, and they use the resources for campaigns and projects, mainly organizing projects, sent organizers to industry, like windcraft industry, where they don't have new members. And also projects, for example, the campaign Work Fair and Safe for organizing temp agency workers in certain companies, and also experiments. But one has to say, freeing resources is only possible for rich unions, not for the poor unions we have in the food sector, for example, where trade union density is very low, and they have many small and medium-sized companies. A second point of experimentation is what I would call participative collective bargaining. So the unions, I give you two examples, I could give you other examples. The unions recently negotiated working time options. So in the German Railway Union said, well, the wage increase of 2.6% can be taken in time or in cash. And they didn't know what was the outcome, and the employees voted 56% voted for 8 free days per year, 2.5% for weekly working time reduction, and the rest for money. And in the engineering industry, the same was done for 3.8 million employees. There are options for temporary working time reduction, and shift workers can take the annual bonus in cash or in 8 free days, and they have this time until end of October. And what I heard now is that 80 to 90% of the shift workers are voting for working time reduction. And so there is a new narrative on flexible working hours over the work life, but determined by the employees. And also what is very important, the unions are involved each 2 years, because each 2 years you can renew your option. This was a real experiment. The unions didn't know what was the outcome, and everybody is surprised about the strong working time preferences, and management is completely upset because they have to recruit new people, and this is what they didn't expect. Now, I come to the experiment, especially done in the region North Rhine-Westphalia, where we live, and there the union said, well, we cannot only react on companies' decisions that say outsource or delocate and dismiss people. So they started 2 projects. One was called Competence and Innovations, the second Better Instead of Cheaper. And both projects, lasting each one 3 years, were tried to develop with the help of consultants in different companies alternatives to outsourcing by producing better alternatives, streamlining processes, killing people, etc. And the own resources of the unions were topped up by external funds, by EU structural funds, which is a crucial point because companies, Christian said this, get so much money for Industry 4.0. And it's a political question that for the workforce zero, you also need to mobilize politically money. Our evaluation, this was done by our institute, by some colleagues of mine. We found a few successful, there were some successful cases, but the development of alternatives in a defensive situation is difficult. You need to start earlier. And this was a starting point for the new project and the Workforce Zero. And the idea was you should not focus on delocation and redundancy. This is too late. This is like in environmental policy, an end of the pipe approach. You should start earlier and focus on overall restructuring of companies and the chain of value added. There's a national hype on Industry 4.0. Management is also concerned how to manage digitalization, so it's open to cooperation, because for them it's also a journey into unknown waters, and they are open. They are still open to discuss this, and they want to hear ideas. They are collecting ideas. And it was said we need to improve trade union cooperation, so 3 manufacturing unions work together, and the idea was to develop a new narrative, but they didn't know which narrative. It was more or less, yes, we can shape the future of work. And there were many resources invested. IG Metall invested 5 full-time officials. There was state money for consultant, and the Trade Union Foundation financed the evaluation, which was done by us. The Work 4.0 team identified companies with proactive works councils and interested management. There was signed a letter of commitment. And then in all these companies, there took place 6 to 8 all-day workshops with the help of consultants, and what was done was stock-taking of digitalization in all departments. I am saying all departments. Also the departments where unions were not present. And the employees were involved. This was not the idea in the beginning, but in the process one learned you need to have the employees as experts of their work places, and there were the problems mapped and also the chances, and the idea was to develop proactive strategies. In the end we had such company maps, and you see for different departments where you see red, there are really problems. This means not enough further training, stress, etc. Where it's green, it is okay. So at one glance, at least you could identify some problems. And behind this is a lot of work, up to 8 days of full-time days of discussion. So the intermediate results, the project will continue. We did research in 19 companies, attended with a team of 4 people all these workshops, learned a lot. And the results was very high involvement of employees from all departments. This meant suddenly the works councillors learned something about departments in which they have never been, because they didn't have contact to R&D and to certain white-collar people. And these people were surprised about the competence of the whole project. There was a clear change of traditional representative works council model. The management was partly really impressed by the professional approach, because they learned themselves and they were ready to debate this. Industry 4.0 is not yet realized; it's underway in early phase. So we had it at different levels. We had only one greenfield investment. So the themes were job security, etc., not new themes, the old themes with slightly changed. And in 9 Mittelstands, these are family-owned companies, there were future agreements signed which said we will continue this process. Now it's a company level, and some were agreeing on procedures and joint working groups, others even on substantial issues like, for example, in extending the apprenticeship training. There was a clear intensification of social partnership, but we also had failed cases because some works councillors didn't want the unions too much to intervene too much in their policy, to be so transparent to outside, and also management lost sometimes interest because, especially in big shareholding companies. So my conclusions. This was a very, for unions, a resource-intensive experiment with unknown results. What we can see is in manufacturing, Industry 4.0 is in process. It's more gradual than disruptive changes. So completely different than the usual dialogue on the disruptive changes. Also, we had some disruptive business models for lamps, producing lamps for cars, completely different technology. The stock taking was extremely helpful because this is a precondition for early intervention in training, for example. The old problems are the new problems, but there's a growing importance of training. And the unions, there took place a lot of mutual learning through joint seminars of works councillors, and also we had reflection workshops with the consultants, the trade union officials, and on the process. Very important is the stronger unions have to help the weaker unions. The food workers union was not even able to attend these workshops in their own companies because they don't have enough staff, and they learn a lot from the bigger union. And a crucial question is you need to mobilize external resources. There are other, and this is a big issue for the German trade unions. The unions succeeded to get through in the coalition agreements 2 years in the last current coalition to get a future of work program, research program at national level, and there will be 1 billion euro for 7 years on different issues, on stress, work organization. So this is important for for developing a new narrative which has not been developed. We have small narratives. It's modernization or vocational training, but the big narrative is something which is still in process and nearly ready. And there are open questions. Are the future agreements a step forward? The company maps get outdated soon, so you have to renew them. And how is the union able to disseminate these results to other companies? And because such a resource-intensive approach is only possible in a few companies, but the generalization is not so easy. And a wonderful quote from one consultant: in these workshops we have mainly been working on the attitudes of the works councillors. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.